And we're back for another episode of the Madden Report. As always, I'm your host, James Madden, joined alongside my co-host, Coach Madden. And it's been a while since we've been on the set here for the Madden Report. We've had a little bit of a hiatus, but we're finally back in the loop of things. And, as we near the end, as we've gotten to the end of the NBA season, the NBA Finals just wrapped up. The Golden State Warriors taking down our Boston Celtics in 6 games. Coach, what are your thoughts on how this NBA season went and how the NBA Finals turned out?
Ultimately, the East stinks. The Eastern Conference is not a great conference. Celtics aren't as good as they're perceived to be, and I think that the West is just the superior conference right at this time. I think it's more super team driven in the East, and I think it's more continuity based. From scratch in the West, and I think that goes a long ways. With the exception of the Golden State, who actually did win, beat the Celtics. They spent a little bit of money to get there, but as a whole, it's more of continuity than anything else. And the East just didn't do it for me this year.
And I agree with you from a little bit. From a skill standpoint, the West is definitely a lot better. A lot better basketball is played in the West. And it's very different. It's been this way for, 30 years. The Eastern Conference is kind of built on physical, hard-nosed basketball. You even go back to the 80s when you had those Celtics teams, those Knicks teams, and even the bad boy Pistons. They kind of are known to try and beat each other up in the Eastern Conference, when in the Western Conference, those teams kind of just want to go out there, go score 120 points. They kind of play based off, kind of show off their skill and not really play the most physical brand of basketball. And in the NBA Finals, that seems to reign supreme is when teams use their skill to their advantage rather than try and beat up their opponent. And that's what we saw. The Warriors went up against the number one defense in the league, the Celtics, and went out there. They scored 120, 110 consistently, and it showed that the Celtics' physical brand of basketball wasn't going to be enough to beat a very talented Golden State Warriors team. But nonetheless, we turned the page to the next calendar year in the NBA, and we move on to last night's NBA draft. We are going to break down and talk about the lottery picks in last night's NBA draft. It was a fun draft last night. 58 total selections made. 2 second-round selections were forfeited by Milwaukee and Miami due to free agency violations last summer. But we move right into the number 1 overall pick is a power forward from Duke, Paolo Banchero, drafted by the Orlando Magic. Kind of a controversial number 1 pick for many around the basketball world. Coach, what are your thoughts on this pick?
I just think they saw the program that he came from, in his AAU career. All that went into it, and I think that, they made the right choice. I think he's one A, 1B top player in the draft, and I think he's going to be an absolute stud in this league.
I'm with you on this one. I think there was about maybe a 3-week period or a month period where Auburn for Jabari Smith Jr. was kind of the lock to be the number 1 pick to go to Orlando. But yesterday morning, it kind of changed. There were a lot of rumblings on Twitter around the league that Paolo Banchero was a significant and legitimate choice for the number 1 pick, and that's what happened. Banchero is a 6'11 forward. He's 250 pounds and was one of the best players in college basketball this year as only a freshman, 19 years old. So I think, just like you said, the culture that he was a part of at Duke and just the NBA talent that they produce each and every year made it a good choice. And me personally, I'm not an NBA GM, so my opinion doesn't really matter. But I would have taken Jabari Smith. I just think his versatility and his athleticism makes him the best player in the draft. But without a doubt, Banchero and Smith are my top 2 players in the draft. But Smith falling down to number 3, which is surprising because I thought he'd be number 1. But next up, we move to the number 2 pick. The Oklahoma City Thunder select another big man power forward from Gonzaga, Chet Holmgren.
This fellow is the most intriguing guy in the draft, I think, James. He's big. He can shoot. He can do a little bit of the dirty work. He can set screens, get to the rim. I think he is, like I said, 1A, 1B top player in this draft. I think he's going to have a absolutely fabulous NBA career. Once he gets going. And he comes from now a prestigious program in Gonzaga. Mark Few is really good at putting talent into the NBA.
And like you said, he has a gift for the game of basketball. He's able to kind of do everything on both ends of the floor. And I saw a little bit of his tapes last night. the way he dribbles the ball for a 7'1", 7'2" center is borderline absurd. I mean, he was playing at Stephen Curry's camp in high school, and they showed a video of him guarded by Stephen Curry, and he was able to just dribble right through the defense, get right down the lane, guarded by Stephen Curry, and make it look easy. So Holmgren, a solid pick for Oklahoma City. And a lot of people were saying, well, since Jabari Smith didn't get drafted number 1, he's going to go number 2. But Holmgren to Oklahoma City was kind of a done deal, no matter who went number 1, unless Holmgren obviously went number 1 because of the fits. A wing and a guard is the last thing that Oklahoma City would need. So they kind of drafted the position they needed the most, and that was a big man. So they went out there and got maybe one of the most dominant big men in this class. Next up, we move to the number 3 pick, the Houston Rockets. They selected power forward from Auburn, Jabari Smith Jr. Smith, my personal favorite prospect in this draft. Coach, what are your thoughts on this pick?
Jabari is an intriguing prospect for this NBA class. He can shoot. He can rebound. He can do he can do a lot of the dirty work. I think he had 7.4 rebounds on an average, which is pretty good. And going into the NBA as a rookie, you're going to need to show that you can do a little bit of the dirty work and get the ball going. And then he can spot up and shoot from anywhere on the floor, and he's big at doing that too at 6'10".
Yeah, and like I said, my personal favorite prospect in this draft headed to Houston. I think I'm a huge fan of Bruce Pearl as a coach and kind of what he's built at Auburn. While over the past 10 years, the culture he's built, a winning program. But Jabari Smith Jr., like I said, a player who could have very easily been the top pick, fell to number 3 to a Houston Rockets team that's really trying to turn the ship around, finished with the worst record in the NBA last season. But they're kind of starting to build a stronger foundation. They got young players like Jabari Smith Jr. now, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., even Alperen Şengün, who they got in the late first round last year. So kind of trying to build for the future, build a solid foundation, and turn the ship around and go back to what they were not too long ago, maybe 3, 4, or 5 years ago, with Harden and Chris Paul. Next up, we move to the number 4 pick. A lot of people thought this pick was a stretch for Keegan Murray. The 4th pick, Sacramento Kings select power forward from Iowa, Keegan Murray, and a lot of rumblings were going around saying Jaden Ivey should have been the number 4 pick, but him and Sacramento didn't really see eye to eye, and he didn't really wish to play in Sacramento. So nonetheless, Keegan Murray headed to Sacramento.
Keegan Murray is an interesting guy. I don't really particularly like the Iowa program. They've always been, too much defensive-minded for me and not enough offense, but he can shoot the ball from anywhere on the floor. He's a big body, and he comes from a Big Ten that, has its up and downs, a lot of middle of the pack. They have a couple that, are in the top 20, but as a whole, it's mid to middle of the pack, and it's gonna take some time for him to adjust to the NBA life.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of Keegan Murray's game. Like I said, I think it's kind of a stretch for him. I pictured him maybe around the 8-9 area of the draft, maybe to New Orleans or San Antonio. But nonetheless, they take him at number 4 to Sacramento. Keegan Murray is a player who's really changed his game a ton over the past year. His freshman year averaged around 7 a game. Last year averaged around 24 a game. So he's a very similar player to Jabari Smith Jr., who got drafted 3rd to Houston. But Keegan Murray, he's going to be a solid pick for them, a team that they didn't really need guards. They have De'Aaron Fox. They drafted Davion Mitchell high in last year's draft, so they were in need of a big man after they had traded away Marvin Bagley in February. But Keegan Murray headed to Sacramento, and he's the highest pick ever from the Iowa Hawkeye program, so a solid pick there. And the number 5 pick, going to the Detroit Pistons, Jaden Ivey, a point guard from Purdue, one of the most intriguing prospects, maybe who could very well end up being the best player in this draft, headed to Detroit.
This is interesting because he's going to a Pistons team who has struggled to draft in the past. He's considered to be one of the most electric guys in this draft. He can handle the ball a little bit. He can shoot. He can get dirty, which kind of fits right into what the Pistons do, but they just kind of can't seem to get it right. So I see him here for a few years and then maybe moving on to somewhere else, maybe even in the West, because he seems more like a West kind of guy.
And I really love what this Pistons team did last night in the draft. They got him, Jaden Ivey from Purdue. They also got center Jalen Duren, who we'll get to in a little bit. But Jaden Ivey is a beast. He was the best point guard in the country this year. Obviously, the first point guard off the draft board. A player who could have went fourth overall, but just Sacramento wasn't really interested because of their no need for guards. But I think this backcourt, maybe in the next couple of years, between Jaden Ivey and last year's top overall pick, Cade Cunningham, can turn out to be one of the best in the league. They also have young core guys like Isaiah Stewart. They have Sadiq Bey. So Detroit's kind of in a similar position to Houston. They've drafted talent over the past couple of years, and now it's just a matter of whether or not they can make that talent work. So we'll have to see, but I really love this pick for Detroit and what Detroit did last night in the draft. Next up, we have the 6th overall pick going to the Indiana Pacers, Benedict Mathurin, small forward from Arizona, one of the more intriguing prospects as well, a very lanky and athletic forward headed to Indiana.
Yeah, his size kind of deceives him a little bit. 6'7", but he's a lot longer than that. He doesn't shoot the ball that well, but can score, and it's real streaky when he does it. He's gonna. This is gonna be another one that's gonna take some time to adjust to this league because it's not college anymore, and it's not Arizona. Who I know you were high on Arizona last year, but I was not. I thought they were kind of like a trick or treat kind of program. But I think he'll adjust at some point in the next 4 or 5 years and become a role player.
Yeah, I like this pick. I liked Benedict Mathurin. He was the Pac-12 Player of the Year, and Indiana has the potential to be good. They just traded for Tyrese Halliburton last season, a player who could very well end up being an all-star at some point in his career. But Mathurin is a lanky and very versatile forward from Montreal. He kind of struggled his freshman year at Arizona, but really similar to Keegan Murray, turned it around and produced a ton this year under a new coach at Tommy Lloyd his sophomore year. So Benedict Mathurin is a very talented, very athletic forward who's going to bring a lot to the table for Indiana on both sides of the floor. And something I thought was funny in his press conference last night, he said, they asked him, who's the one player you're looking forward to playing against? He said, Luguentz Dort, shooting guard on Oklahoma City Thunder. It's just kind of an unorthodox player to look forward to, but they were actually roommates in high school and were best friends growing up. So it's kind of funny to see two players who were so close growing up and were so close and so played together on the same high school team going up against each other in the NBA. But next up, we have an interesting prospect, a player who didn't even play a game or a minute in college. The 7th overall pick headed to the Portland Trailblazers, Kentucky shooting guard Shaedon Sharpe.
Yeah, this one's kind of funny, James. He, like you say, he never played a minute. But he does come from at least a year of Coach Cal's tutelage. And if he can find a role, if he can do the dirty work, set screens, get to the rim, I don't believe he's all that big of a shooter. I think he can find somewhat of a role in the NBA, but it's going to take time, and it's definitely a project.
And like you said, it's going to be a project. The talent for him is there for Shaedon Sharpe. He certainly has the talent necessary to be a solid and successful NBA player. But it's just, for me, the red flag is just his maturity. Obviously, like you said, like I said, he didn't play a minute in college basketball last year, not due to an injury. Coach Calipari just viewed he wasn't mature yet. He didn't finish his senior year of high school. He skipped his senior year. He was the number 1 player in the class of 2022 for high school, skipped it. He was at Dream City Christian High School in Arizona and went straight to Kentucky, didn't play. He just kind of practiced with the team, ran drills, ran team activities with them, and it helped him become a better player. But Portland thinks that they have what it takes to kind of make him a more mature player and make him grow into his body. Because like I said, the talent's definitely there for Shaedon Sharpe. It's just a matter of putting the pieces together and becoming a more mature basketball player in a grown man's league in the NBA. Next up, we have another player who his draft stock really skyrocketed over the past month or so in the NBA draft combine and all those types of things. The 8th overall pick headed to the New Orleans Pelicans from the G League Ignite. Originally, he played pro ball in Australia before. Dyson Daniels.
I think this guy is going to be okay, James. He's played a little bit in the G League, which I know sometimes, you have. It's not perceived to be a great league. But it is a developmental league, and he got some NBA coaching tutelage there. And I think he's going to be okay as long as he realizes that, he's got some time it's going to take some time for him to work his way into any team that he looks on with, even after getting drafted by the Pelicans. He's a legitimate, he's a natural point guard, and he looks to facilitate, and just by spending that time there, I think that he gained some IQ. I think he'll be okay in the end, but it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna take some time.
And I like this pick as well, but it's kind of a lot of coaches, a lot of GMs kind of love the international and the pro prospects because they've had experience. They've shown what they can do playing against other grown men, playing pro basketball. And he played, like I said, he played in Australia, originally from Australia, and then went to the G League, played for the new G League Ignite team. But I think the one red flag for me for Dyson Daniels is the fact he's not the best shooter. And in this league, not only does it really everyone have to be a shooter, especially your point guard, and especially in the Western Conference, where it seems every team in the Western Conference is capable of going out there knocking down 20, 25 threes in a game. So the Pelicans are already a team that struggles with outside shooting, struggles with their spacing. Assuming Zion Williamson will be back at some point, they also have Jonas Valanciunas, and Brandon Ingram really is their only starter and their only significant player that is able to knock down outside shots consistently. So if he can work on his jump shot and become a consistent shooter, maybe a 35% three-point shooter, then he's going to have a successful NBA career for New Orleans. And next up, we have the number 9 pick, the San Antonio Spurs. Small forward from Baylor, Jeremy Sohan. Sohan, a player who won the 6th Man of the Year award in the Big 12 this year. Never started a game for Baylor, but nonetheless, a top 10 pick, 9 overall to the San Antonio Spurs.
James, I'm blanking on the Baylor's Drew. What's
Scott Drew.
Scott Drew is ecstatic that he's only going 2 hours and 43 minutes away from Baylor to play with the Spurs. This guy, not a great shooter, but he does the little dirty work. He didn't coming out of high school. He struggled a little bit, around the perimeter, but setting screens, getting to the rim, rebounding, all that kind of stuff that he was taught at Baylor will go a long ways for him in the NBA.
Yeah, and he's another one of these lanky, versatile forwards that can do it all. He's not the best offensive player, but a lot of GMs and a lot of NBA draft analysts have maybe said he might be one of, if not the best defensive player in this draft. Like I said, didn't start a game at Baylor, but that's not really saying much because that Baylor team was kind of loaded. But I really love the talent Scott Drew has started to produce out of Baylor. He's kind of turned this Baylor program into a top-notch program around the country, even attracting high-ranked high school prospects. But Jeremy Sohan, he's going to be a solid pick. He's kind of the definition of a Spurs player. He's a hard-nosed, gritty player who's going to just put it all out on the line there. He's going to give 110%. He's going to dive on loose balls, which is kind of a lost art in today's NBA. But Jeremy Sohan is a solid pick for them. It's just whether or not he can find a way to start producing at a consistent rate on the offensive end of the floor. But if he can do that, then he's going to have another solid NBA career. Next up, we have shooting guard from Wisconsin, headed to the Washington Wizards at the number 10 overall pick, Johnny Davis.
This pick is probably going to end up being the replacement for Beal. He can shoot a little bit. He can get up and down the floor. He can run lanes. Defensively, he's solid. I really think that this will be the next big guy for Washington in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and I'm with you on this one. I think Johnny Davis might end up being one of the bigger steals of the draft. I think he had the talent and had the potential to be maybe around 5 or 6, but just because he's a lot older than the guys drafted higher than him, he's around 21 years old. He was a junior at Wisconsin this season. So, I mean, NBA executives always take age into a factor no matter how good you are, but I think this is going to be a steal. I remember I was watching the draft coverage last night. Stephen A. Smith, who's a New York Knicks fan, was hoping they'd get him, and just like every NBA team should, I think Johnny Davis is going to turn out to be a very solid and very good NBA player. I think he has the potential to make a couple All-Star games and be the guy for the Washington Wizards in the coming years. And next up, we have another international pick. He is headed to the Oklahoma City Thunder, originally drafted by the New York Knicks, but he will be traded to Oklahoma City once the whole draft is finalized. Ousmane Dieng. He played for the New Zealand Breakers in New Zealand in the NBL, and he's originally from Bordeaux, France, so an international prospect headed to OKC.
This gentleman is enormous, if I'm thinking of the right guy. His wingspan is long. He plays. He's a shot blocker. Can score a little bit. Around the rim. And everybody can shoot a little bit. At this stage, it's just whether or not they can do it consistently. Going to Oklahoma City, I think this will be a project for him, and this could take up to 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get something going with him. But he'll come along and he'll find a role.
Yeah, and Ousmane Dieng, like you said, headed to Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is really hoarding draft picks. I think they have some like 16, 17 first-round picks until 2027. But Sam Presti is doing what he's always done. He's building a young core, and it's just a matter of whether or not they'll be able to win a championship. They had a lot of opportunities with Kevin Durant, and they never did. But Ousmane Dieng, I think this is a very good pick. I mean, a lot of fans never really like the international picks because they're not a ton of fun, but a lot of times they work out because these guys have played pro basketball. They've played against grown men. They've shown what they can do in a pro environment, and that's what he did in New Zealand this year. And like I said, it's not the most fun pick just because everybody wants to see the college players that they watch on TV. They watch the March Madness. But in reality, you got to go out there and draft the best guy available. And Ousmane Dieng has maybe one of the highest ceilings in this draft just because of his athleticism and because of his talent. So I think he's going to turn out to be a very solid pick and very possibly one of the bigger steals in this draft for Oklahoma City. And next up, we have another Oklahoma City pick. The third lottery pick for them, we have shooting guard out of Santa Clara, Jalen Williams, a player who, just like Dyson Daniels, his draft stock skyrocketed over the course of the NBA draft combine.
Jalen comes from Santa Clara, which is in the Mountain West, and they like to get up and down. They like to score. They like to, they don't really pack it in and keep the score down. They want to score 80, 90 points a night. He can shoot. He can play defense. He'll find a role, I think, in this league, whether it's with OKC or somebody else.
Yeah, and I really like this pick. It's just from a fit standpoint, I don't know if I like it for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think, another team would have been better fit for him, as well as he would have been better fit for another team because I don't know what his production is going to really be like in the coming years because they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's emerging as one of the best young stars in the NBA. But Jalen Williams, his wingspan is ridiculous. Hey, he's only 6'4", but he has over a 7-foot wingspan. It's so long that they had to measure it a couple times because they didn't believe that his wingspan was that long. But people are calling Jalen Williams maybe possibly the best shooter in the draft, and that's a team that Oklahoma City has a lot to do if they want to get back to where they've been in the past years. But adding perimeter shooting and adding perimeter depth is definitely one thing that they've needed. And Jalen Williams, like I said, had a terrific combine and a terrific draft process. Originally was considering going back to school, only a sophomore at Santa Clara this season. It was originally an early second rounder, late first rounder, but because of his terrific performance at the draft combine, ended up as the 12th overall pick, and he's headed to OKC. Next up, we have the 13th pick, Jalen Duren, originally drafted by Charlotte, then traded to New York, and then traded to Detroit alongside Kemba Walker, who won't play a minute in Detroit. But Jalen Duren, center from Memphis, the youngest player in the draft, joining a young core in Detroit.
Joining a young core, so he's probably going to get some time early on, just because they do need some size. There's not a lot of that going around in Charlotte right now. And he's a true center, and block shots, around the rim, grab rebounds, get the ball going, and he'll trail for you, and he'll be okay, just because of that how young they really are.
Yeah, and I think this is a solid pick. I would have liked to see New York keep this pick rather than trade him to Detroit for really nothing. But Jalen Duren might be he might be the biggest beast in this draft when it comes just based off his body frame. He's 6'10", 250, and even in college, he was only 18 years old. Like I said, the youngest player in this draft, but he just threw guys around. He showed how he could be one of the most dominant players in college basketball, and he's kind of similar. His body frame is kind of similar to Shaq. Not saying he's going to turn out the same way Shaq did, but I like this pick for Detroit. Detroit, very similar to all the other teams at the top of this draft board, a team that has a lot to do if they want to get back to where they've been in the past, but a good starting point is they can maybe have their franchise cornerstone at the center. In our last pick of the lottery, we have 14th overall, I believe the oldest player in this draft lottery, Kansas small forward Ochai Agbaji, headed to the Cleveland Cavaliers.
One of my favorite guys in college basketball. He stuck it out, through all the mess that we've been through in the last couple of years. He's going to have a lot of IQ going into the NBA. He can get up and down. He's good around the rim. He can shoot the mid range a little bit. He can block shots a little bit. Play some. He can play any kind of big on the defensive end, and he's going to excel right away, especially for the Cavs because again they're still building from their last run. But he's going to make an impact right away with this Cleveland Cavs group.
And I'm with you on this one. This might be my favorite pick of the night. I love Ochai Agbaji, and I have one word to describe this pick. It's a steal. 100%. Like I said earlier, teams are very big on the age of the prospects and how much they have to develop. But for him, I think he should have been a top 10 pick. I think he might have been my favorite player in college basketball, not only because he's a very good basketball player, but he's just such a humble kid. He's a smart kid. He knows how to play basketball, and Bill Self really had a treasure with him, and he was the reason they won the national title. So Cleveland got a steal in Ochai Agbaji, a team. I love this Cleveland team. They have Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and Darius Garland has showed he's not a veteran just yet, but he's shown that he can be a veteran leader. They wanted to give him the max extension last year. He said, why would I take the max extension when I can save money for the other players? So that's the type of leadership and type of unselfishness you need if you want to try and build a solid franchise. And drafting a player like Ochai Agbaji who can turn into a very talented NBA player and quite possibly an NBA All-Star is something that's going to help lead you to a successful run in the next couple of years. And one last pick we'll talk about today is the 53rd overall pick is our Boston Celtics. Their only pick of the night didn't have a first-round pick. That pick was given to Memphis, but the 23rd pick of the second round, point guard from Alabama, J.D. Davison.
I really think, as I said with Bradley Beal, the Wizards kind of found their replacement in this lottery draft. I really believe that the Celtics just found their replacement for Marcus Smart. This kid is a defensive guru. He gets down to the stance. He plays defense very well, and he has a little bit more offensive game than a Marcus Smart type, who was just the defensive player of the year. He can, and Alabama runs the same kind of system that Brad Stevens and Udoka ran this season with the Celtics, and I think he'll be a pretty good fit, an easy fit into the plans next year.
And I like this pick. J.D. Davison has all the talent in the world. He just kind of battled injuries and battled trying to find a spot in the rotation behind a very veteran core for Alabama this season. But J.D. Davison was one of the top players in the country coming out of high school. He was like around 15, 12 in the country, and was a 5-star, went to Alabama, kind of struggled, like I said, struggled to crack minutes in the rotation this year, but finds a home with the Boston Celtics. He's a player with a ton of athleticism. He jumps through the roof. He was one of the best dunkers in college basketball this year, and a ton of versatility, a ton of upside. He's only 19 years old, so kind of obviously, a lot of times, especially this late in the draft, you don't see a lot of these players pan out to be successful NBA players, not even really crack minutes in the rotation. But you know what they say, it's not where you get drafted, it's what you do with the opportunity. And I think he can definitely crack the rotation in the coming years and become a solid role player, a solid NBA player, and have a successful NBA career with the Celtics. And that should wrap up our NBA Draft Recap Show. As always, I'm your host, James Madden, and join alongside my co-host, Coach Madden. Make sure to tune into our next episode as we turn the page into the calendar year of the NBA season, and we get ready for a fun-filled summer in the sports world. Thank you.